Hey, Frank Kern here. Welcome to this video. This one's a little impromptu. Our mission right now is I want to take you behind the scenes and actually show you some of the Rainmaker certification materials and show you how to use them by example, and then show you what the net effect of using them can be. And I'll do that by using my own business as the example. So I'm kind of taking you behind the scenes of how everything works in my company. So if you remember from watching the class, we have a clear path to get from not having the revenue we want to getting the revenue we want, right? And there are really two clear paths. The 30,000 foot view big picture path is, okay, we want to build a list, sell them something, and then sell them something else, which is like a very, very simplified version of it. And then when we took a deeper dive, we realized that, okay, the real like granular level clear path is number one, we want to maximize the value of every single person who comes through our sales process. Number two, we want to automate everything that works so we can't mess ourselves up. And number three, we want to scale with ads. So what I want to do right now is show you all that stuff in real time. Okay, so let's get to it. I'm filming this for you at, let's see, 6:05 on the 24th of March, and today is not a typical day. Actually, I got kind of lucky today. First of all, if you recall from the class, I let you know that, the main thing that I promote to get people into my funnel, into my primary sales process, is a little package deal where they can get 4 of my courses for $4. And I've been promoting that forever, and I've been basically using the same ads forever, and it's just been working. So here are the stats for today. Like I said, it's the 24th of March. Starting to scale this one up a little bit more. Spent $832 so far on this guy, and look at this. The sales for today are $2,319, which doesn't always happen, by the way. Like, that's almost 300% return on my ad spend. It's usually not that. It's usually like 1.2% or something, but for whatever reason, I'm lucky today, and it makes me look smarter than I really am. Usually it's not going that well, but for whatever reason today, people are just spending more money, and I'll take it. I'm not going to complain. So our very first thing that I want to go over with you is, how do you make sure that you're maximizing the amount of money that every person who's coming into your sales process is going to give you in the immediate short term, right? And so in Rainmaker, what we've done is we have identified that every business model has a unique sales process, and there really aren't that many of them. And in this particular case, this offer right here, it follows what's called a loss leader sales process and a loss leader framework. So through the magic of editing, now we can just see that right here on the screen. So in Rainmaker, we diagram out what these sales processes look like. And I'll walk you through this and sort of show you how this corresponds to my own. So in this case, we're sending traffic. You can send traffic to an opt-in page if you want to, or directly to a sales page. In my case, I'm sending people directly to a sales page, which is, hey, you can get 4 courses for $4. And on that sales page, they opt in when they start to order. Okay. Now, we take a second and sort of show you the numbers behind that and why this is so important. If we look right here, we can see that I've had 169 people start to order. All right, so they hit the sales page, it's a very simple page, and they start to order, they enter their name and email address, and then 46 of them have purchased. So what I'm doing there is I'm starting to build a list, right? Now I'm getting customers, which is great, but I'm also getting people who don't buy, which is fine, because having a list is very, very good. If you remember our 30,000 foot view, the clear path is build a list, sell them something else. So this is how we're building a list in this specific sales process. So in this case, to reiterate, they're seeing an ad. They don't go directly to an opt-in page. They go to my sales page. Now, you notice I call this a loss leader. And the reason I call it that is because if all I was selling was this $4 thing, I wouldn't make any money. I'm literally selling the $4 thing at a loss, and I'm hoping to make my profit, which I am, by all this other stuff, and then the next sales process I'm going to share with you. All right, so people see an ad, they come to the sales page, which says loss leader here, was the sales page. They enter their name and email address, and they either buy or they don't. All right, and so if they don't buy, all right, we put them in an email sequence. It's called a cart abandon sequence. In our case, we really like to use deadlines. So specifically, this is a deadline-driven countdown sequence. We put them in a countdown sequence, which drives them back to that page. All right, so if we look at this in action, okay, and I know this is really granular right now, I just want to show you like how this stuff works. So at the very least, if you don't enroll in the training, like maybe you'll get some value from this and implement what you're seeing in your own business. So let me show you how that affects the sales funnel by actually showing you the numbers in the sales funnel itself. So in the real world, when people come to this web page right here and they enter their email address and they don't buy, so we figure we got 123 of these folks that started to buy but they didn't, I put them in a little 4-part email sequence right there, same day, that's driving them to a sales page, which is an identical clone of the original sales page. I just like to track everything, and it makes another pass at making the offer. So basically the email sequence, all of these email sequences are template based, by the way. It's like, hey, this thing's going to increase in price or it's going to expire, you better go buy it. So what's happened so far for today, for example, is of these people, 3 of them who didn't originally buy have now gotten those emails and they've come back and they've purchased $39 worth of stuff right at that particular stage in the funnel. So that's how that works. Now, again, the reason I'm showing you all of this is to answer the question of, good Lord, how are you able to spend $800 and get $2,300 back by selling a $4 thing, right? So we're here now. Okay, so they've seen the page, they started to order, and either they do or they don't. If they don't, they get an email sequence that's driving them back to the sales page for the $4 offer. And then if they buy, now we have upsells and order bumps. All right, so I can't tell you how critical this is. All right, and I'll show you the checklist in a minute. But one of the ways, if you're dealing with the sales process, that you can start making more money immediately is to add critical pieces to it that don't exist. So the reason this is so profitable is because my average order size, now remember, when we were talking about our granular, let's bring this part back up here, when we were getting granular and saying, all right, our clear path is maximize the value of every single person who comes into your funnel, my average order value, you can see it right here, is $47.33. Even though the thing I'm selling is $4. So the question would be why? Well, the reason why is because I'm split testing 2 pages, by the way, right here. The reason why is because I have these things called order bumps right here. All right, so I've got these people are taking, there are 2 different order bumps, and some of these guys are taking them. So I immediately, because of these order bumps, I've made extra money right there. I also have one-click upsells, right? And so the one-click upsell, this one, that brought in an extra $370 in revenue. This other one brought in an extra $404 in revenue. This other one brought in an extra $351 in revenue. So if we look at that, all right, that's this part of our sales process, of our documented, like our little flow chart of the sales process. You can have as many upsells as you want, right? So how do you take this concept and then actually make sure you do it right? Well, in Rainmaker, what we did is we wanted to make sure there was nothing left to chance. Okay, so the reason that funnel is working so well is because of this little document right here. All right, this is the checklist for a loss leader sales process. I say it's info based, but it could be a e-commerce thing as well. It really doesn't matter. This is the checklist for if you're selling something cheap and you want to maximize the amount of money that you get from every single visitor into the funnel. So if we look at this, and I won't go through all of this stuff, we'll just look at this part right here. These are all of the things that we can do to make that sales process work better, right? So if you've got a business, or if your client has a business, and let's say they, have a book funnel or whatever, just to use this as an example, you could just take this thing out and look at their sales process and just draw it out on a napkin, and you can be like, okay, do you have a 2-step order form? If they don't, then we could install that. Do you have an order bump? If they don't, then you could install that. Do you have an upsell, a downsell, a second upsell? If they don't, we can install that. Do you have a pop-up? If they see the upsell and they leave, is there a pop-up there? If there's not one, you can install it. Is there a deadline sequence to the non-buyers of the main offer? If there's not, you could install it. Now, I just showed you how powerful that is. Now, granted, it got me a big whopping 3 customers today, but still, 3 customers are 3 customers. It's just free money that I otherwise wouldn't have had. And then we could even add all of these things in here. Deadline sequence to non-buyers of the bumps and so forth. Now, the reason this is so important is because having a checklist like this eliminates any guesswork, right? So it's not like you have to figure out anything or reinvent the wheel. You're literally like, okay, this is this person's sales process, which in this case is a loss leader sales process, typical book funnel or whatever, tripwire funnel, however you want to word it. And we know, like, all right, if they don't have these things, we can just put them in there, and chances are it's going to make more money than it would if they didn't. Another cool thing about having these checklists, and we have it for every sales process around. I'm just showing you this one because I think it's something that you've probably seen before. You're very familiar with this type of funnel. So another thing that's very, very helpful about this is if you do have something, you can also find out where it needs to be tweaked. So we have, for example, all these places where you can look and you can plug in what the conversion rate is for each one of the little pieces in the sales process. And if it's not good, you know how to fix it, right? And that's really cool. So for example, with the deadline sequence to non-buyers, for example, so if someone starts to order and they don't, in Rainmaker, we have templates and frameworks for that. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's like, okay, here is the language and messaging that has proven to work historically across multitudes of industries for a cart abandonment deadline sequence. For a one-time offer pitch, we have 3 different frameworks on how to sell something in a one-time offer, one-click upsell environment, which is going to be an educational or it's going to be solving the problem that the product creates. And that's typically, it sounds weird, but it's kind of like the problem in and of itself is a good thing, and this is how to deal with the good thing. I'll give you an example. Let's say that the product they just bought is, here's how to get a whole bunch of leads. Now, the one-click upsell would be, okay, the problem that you now might have that you're getting all these leads is you don't know how to follow up with them correctly. The one-click upsell would solve that problem. That's what I mean. And then the third type is a direct offer, which is simply, okay, here's this thing and you should buy it. So we've got 3 frameworks that show you how to do these things. So there's nothing really left to chance here. You just do everything based on what has historically worked very, very well. And when you plug in the numbers, all right, which one of these things should we work on the most? And in the event that you're not happy with the way the funnel's performing or the sales process is performing, right? So this is why I'm able to, and I want to reiterate, I don't do this every day, unfortunately, but it is profitable, like overwhelmingly profitable long term. This is why I spent $832 today, and so far have purchased, or rather have brought in, $23.19. Let's see if I can hit refresh and get lucky, and maybe it'll bring in more revenue. I have this belief that the more times you hit refresh, look at there. See, the more times you hit refresh, the more money that you make. So that's why it's working, right? Now, also in the class that you saw, the on-demand class, or whether you joined me live or whatever, you heard me talk about this concept of getting paid to get paid. All right. And that is exactly what is happening here. So the overwhelming majority of the active people on my list. Now remember, the 30,000 foot view, the clear path is, all right, we want to build a list, sell them something, and sell them something else. And this is obviously taking for granted that, of course, we're delivering on our promises and our products are good. Like, that's a given, right? So, obviously that's true. But we want to build a list, we want to sell them something, we want to sell them something else. Well, the concept of building a list, which we're clearly doing right here, right? We got 171 people have opted in, 47 of them have purchased. So we're building a list every single day. This is great. But in terms of selling them something and selling them something else, how do we really make that work well? Well, if we look at, again, this all comes down to, and the reason I'm showing this to you, is it all comes down to just knowing what to do in terms of which process and what pieces of a process are applicable to the current situation, right? So in this case, my business, I sell products and services. So if we look at an info product based ascension front end process, which means I'm selling something cheap and then I ultimately want to sell something more expensive over time, we just kind of covered this part right here, right? So if I had a marker, which I don't, but like imagine where my mouse is moving right here, we just covered like this, everything from here over. But what about this area that I'm circling right here? That would be the back end sequence. This is the sell them something else part, all right? So what you saw was something called a one-to-many sales presentation in the form of a webinar, right? Which taught you about the Rainmaker methodology and taught you about the concepts and showed you like, okay, here are some things you can do to get money immediately. Here's the importance of building systems and processes. So like it'll just work forever and we can't break it because of our entrepreneurial ADD brains. And then here's how we scale with ads. So if we look at this, now the question becomes, okay, is there a back-end sequence? And if so, is it set up right and can we maximize it, right? So in this case, what you went through is the back end sequence of what I'm now installing for everybody who buys the $4 thing, right? So let me show you what that is specifically from a sales process standpoint. All right, so here we are. And again, this is actually taken from the Rainmaker training materials. So I call this, on this particular document, sales process using webinar. Sometimes you'll hear me refer to it as a one-to-many process, meaning you're a one person selling to many people process. This could be done for live webinars, Zoom calls, automated webinars, and on-demand classes. It doesn't matter. But let's pick up where we left off. So we just had our loss leader, and that was fully optimized, and we did Rainmaker stuff to it, and you see how profitable it is. And now we want to sell more stuff, right? So we maximize the value of everybody coming into that particular sales process. We built a list, we sold them something. Now we want to be able to sell them something else. So we got a couple of things we could do when we have a webinar sales process. In our case, there's no need for me to really run ads for this thing because I've already got the customer on my list, right? So we start with something that's called an invite sequence. Now, in Rainmaker, there is a template and a framework for every imaginable email sequence. So whenever you're seeing something like a sequence or anything like that, always know that there is a corresponding framework and template for it, so you're never reinventing the wheel. You're never like, well, what does that look like? You just go grab it and then fill in the blanks so you can use it for your own thing. So our very first thing is the webinar sequence, the webinar invite sequence. And we want to know, the first thing we're looking for is do they register, right? So when you're doing Rainmaker stuff, we're always trying to maximize these little pieces. And if we can make each little piece work just a little bit better, the cumulative effect of that is exponential growth. All right. So the purpose of the webinar invite sequence is just to get them to go register for the webinar. All right. So you saw mine. Okay. And the purpose of the whole emails that got you there was just to get you to go register. All right. So do they register? Yes. The second thing we need to see is, do they actually attend? So if you're doing it live, it's pretty easy to track. If you're using automated webinar software, it's easy to track. If you're using an on-demand class, which is simply someone registers and then they're immediately taken to a page with a video on it. And that's what I find works best, by the way. We measure attendance by did they at least stay for 20 minutes? Okay, but whatever your criteria is, did they attend? And then the next logical step is, did they stay long enough to see the offer? And then did they buy, or if you're high ticket, did they apply or book an appointment, etc. Okay, so then of course we have, how do you follow up with people and how do you make all of that kind of stuff work better? So without getting into too much granular detail, I want to take you through the checklist of if you're using a one-to-many thing like a webinar or live Zoom calls or an on-demand class or whatever as either your main sales process or as an add-on to something that you're already doing, how can you make it work even better? And that is the checklist. So remember, every sales process, it's got a checklist that goes along with it where you can be like, okay, does it have this cool thing? I'll just show you. Hang on. So this is the checklist that corresponds with a one-to-many sales process, right? And there's a lot of stuff that you can do. And all of these things, if you install them, can typically and will typically make more money than if you didn't. So one thing which people don't really talk about a lot is, let's say you've got a webinar and it's actually going to be a live webinar. And so, it's Monday and you're promoting a live webinar that's going to happen on Friday. In that event, you can actually make a little pre-sale for something right after the person registers, which I know is completely counterintuitive, but it doesn't have, generally speaking, it doesn't have any effect whatsoever on whether or not they show up for the webinar that's at a later date, and it helps you make more money. So that's one thing. Now, that would only be applicable if you're doing something where you have them register several days before the actual webinar happens. So it's not always relevant to every single one-to-many, aka webinar, aka on-demand class scenario. But if it is, it's worth trying. All right. So let's have a look at more common things that would be on the checklist. Number one, okay, is did the person actually show up and watch the sales presentation? If they didn't, we would need something called a go back sequence, right? That's, hey, go back and watch this thing. All right. So we would be like, okay, if we don't have that, then we should have that, because the more people who actually watch it are going to be the more people who can buy, because if they don't watch the presentation, they're not going to see the value and they're not going to know what to do, right? So simply starting to watch it, like showing up and actually finishing it and going to see the pitch, these are two totally different animals. And what's cool is it's very easy to track whether or not people are doing this. So if you're running a sales process like this and you're not tracking whether or not they're staying long enough to see the pitch, and if you're not sending them back to go finish it and go to see the pitch, then you're leaving money on the table. So this is another piece of the checklist right here. Now, what's cool is, again, all of these things, like the go watch sequence or the go back sequence, the go finish sequence, these are all template based. They're all framework based, right? So it's just frameworks and templates that are based on a gazillion, tests that we've done using this particular sales process. Another checklist item would be, okay, are you sending people from the webinar directly to a web page, or are you sending them to a two-step order form? So a lot of people on a webinar will go, okay, click the button somewhere on the webinar and it'll take you to the order form to register, and it just takes them straight to an order form. Well, that's silly, because we know that most of the people who go to that order form won't buy, because of something I call the rule of damn it, which clearly states that most people won't do what you want them to do. So if we know that, we might as well capture their name and email address and phone number before they're taken to the order page, because we know these are the hottest possible prospects. And if you think about this logically, it makes perfect sense. They responded to whether it was an ad getting them to register or an email getting them to register. They registered, they showed up, they stayed long enough to see the pitch, and they clicked the dang button and began to buy. And so there's not much more behavioral buying intent than that, right? I mean, they've taken all the steps to clearly demonstrate that they're interested in doing business with you. So if you don't have that, then putting that in place will now allow you to send a deadline sequence for everybody who started to order but did not. And that, literally, like that one little thing, like this little block right here, these two things can completely revolutionize any sales process that is using webinars, whether they're live or pre-recorded. It really doesn't matter. If you don't have these two things, then you're just leaving money on the table. And what's cool is, guess what? The deadline sequence that drives people to go and actually buy the thing that they just saw the sales pitch for and almost bought, it's all template based in Rainmaker, right? So you're probably wondering about all of these other things as well. Well, what these other things are is, for example, do you have a one-click upsell or one-time offer on the thing that you're selling from your webinar? And so if it's a high-ticket thing, maybe it wouldn't be appropriate. But if you're selling something that's a couple $100, why wouldn't you, right? It's free money. So that's another thing that you could just add, just kind of go through the checklist right there and add it to that sales process. And this is literally how we build things. And this is how we're able to transfer Rainmaker skills and thinking from me to you by taking it and making it really, really templated and checklist driven and process driven, so it doesn't leave a lot of guesswork, and the net effect of it is pretty obvious, right? I just showed you the sales figures just for the front end part of our business, and it's working very, very well. Now, these other things that you're noticing in this checklist, and you might have noticed in the other checklists, these are all diagnostic things. So if you are doing this for yourself, or if you have a client and you want to improve the business and make more money as quickly as possible, this is where you're looking for gaps. So even if they have all of these things, if you can get the numbers on them, then you'll know, all right, maybe we could improve this. And what's interesting, like I've said a couple of times throughout this presentation, is that it's never really like, okay, I'm going to do this one thing, and this one thing is going to totally change the business forever. It's usually there's like one really important thing you can do that's totally obvious, like, hey, let's take a campaign that worked really well before and send it again and get money immediately. But in terms of scaling the business and really getting that long-term profitability, it's generally a couple of improvements, like, a 10% increase here, for example, on your registration page, and then a 10% increase on your show up rate, and a 10% increase on your saw pitch rate. Let's not even think about the liquidators, which is going to be something they would buy immediately after they register. Let's just assume you're doing an automated webinar and that doesn't apply. All right. And let's say that we have a 10% increase in the people who start to order, right? And then we get a 10% increase in the amount of people who actually complete the order because we do a better job of our email follow-up. Well, all those little 10% increases, and a 10% increase isn't really that big of a deal, but all of those combined, that can literally double a business, and it can do it in a very, very short amount of time. So my point is, if you are a marketing person and you like marketing and you want to be able to generate a lot more revenue in a business quickly, not by some magic, dumb, gimmicks or whatever, but by just proven processes, then Rainmaker certification is for you. All of these process maps you're seeing and all of these checklists that you're seeing, we have them for all of the major business models out there. So it doesn't matter if it's brick and mortar, we've got one for it. If it is high ticket where you're generating inbound phone calls, we've got one for it. If it's e-com, we've got one for it. So all of the things you're seeing here, we have it for every type of business, and all of the things that these checklists are calling for, such as deadlines or go finish or go watch the pitch or whatever, all of the communications needed, we have those as frameworks and templates that you could just use instead of having to reinvent the wheel. So hopefully you found this helpful, number one, and it's giving you some ideas on things you can do in your own business, assuming you use either of these two sales processes. And more importantly, hopefully you're like, okay, this really makes sense. This is very logical to me. I understand that I can really increase my results significantly and really consistently and predictably by using this Rainmaker methodology, because it's not guesswork, it's nothing fancy, it's nothing trendy, it's no flash in the pan stuff. It is data-driven, experience-driven systems and processes that are being handed to you on, well, virtually speaking, on a silver platter. A lot of questions that people get, by the way, speaking of that, is how long do I have access to this? And the answer is as long as we're able to keep it on the internet. So I would assume forever, unless the internet goes away or something like that. Another question you might have is how long will it take me to complete this? And the answer is I've made it where you don't complete it any faster than 12 weeks. I did that on purpose, by the way. I'm not here to overwhelm you with a lot of material just for the sake of giving you things so it'll appear like it's value by the sheer volume of stuff. I don't want to do that. I don't want to lead to overwhelm for you. So I've deliberately created this class and the certification to be completed no sooner than 12 weeks, so you really actually are able to implement everything. If you need to take longer, or if you simply want to take longer, you can. As you know, you get access to my team. And one thing you should know, we don't really talk about this publicly, but we don't really care if you joined 6 months ago and you still want to talk to the team. We're not keeping track of that. So it's not like we're going to be like, oh no, you can't, we're not going to answer your questions anymore because it's past the 12-week mark. We don't do business that way. So once you're in here, you've got access to the team as long as you need us or as long as we exist. So there's none of that to worry about. So please don't feel like there's any pressure, like you have to get this done in a 12-week period. You don't. You can do it at your own pace, and we're always here for you. And as you know, we're here for you in two different ways. We're here for you via live chat and email access, and we have daily office hours. And as well, every other week, I do live hot seats where I actually bring people on and we apply Rainmaker methodologies to your business or to a client business to increase revenue immediately. So if you've been on the fence about this, registration closes Monday. That's when the new cohort starts. It's very important that we do it this way, that we kind of have everybody going through the training at the same time, at the same pace, because we want it to be organized for you so you have a good experience. So registration for this cohort is closing on Monday. If you like this and this is making sense to you, then you should enroll. You will enjoy this. I guarantee it. As a matter of fact, I literally guarantee it. If after 30 days you don't think it was awesome, let us know. I don't want your tuition. I'll give it back to you. So with all that said, you have absolutely nothing to lose in investing in this, and I think it's pretty obvious that you have a potentially massive amount that you can gain. And hopefully my impromptu video was helpful to you. That was the goal. So thanks so much for watching this. Thank you for attending my class that originally taught you about the Rainmaker concepts and methodologies, and I look forward to seeing you in certification. Take it easy.